Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 8th episode of the Modern Brewer podcast with me, your host, Chris Lewington. This is going to be a really useful episode. There are literally thousands of resources available for brewers to learn about beer quality. Quite frankly, for some, there's too much. So what are the essential aspects of beer quality every brewer needs to know? And how do you turn that into actual quality program in the brewery? What pieces of equipment do you need to buy in order to start a lab from the ground up? And what are the affordable ways of doing all of this? And finally, what are the most common mistakes made when starting a quality program? Well, all of this will be covered in more in this episode. But just before we introduce our guest, I'd like to mention our episode sponsor. And there may be some shock with this one. It's actually Brew Resourceful. If your brewery is interested in reducing its impact on the environment and saving costs by reducing wastage, please check out the Brew Resourceful website on www.brewresourceful.com. There are free tools on how to measure brewhouse efficiency, adjust pH using lactic acid instead of the bad for the environment acidulated malt, and calculate all of your utility consumptions. Also, there is a free benchmarking tool so you can compare your brewery's key resourcefulness metrics against over 50 craft breweries, and just recently, a case study detailing on how we partnered with Northern Monk to help reduce water consumption by 7.6 million litres of water a year. So please check that out on www.brewresourceful.com. Okay, so here we go. Our guest today is Tanya Kondratyuk. She started her career at Heriot-Watt and then moved to the legendary Goose Island as quality lab analyst and sensory coordinator before moving to Northern Monk in November 2020 as quality control manager, where she built the lab from the ground up. I first met Tanya at a brewing lectures talk in Newcastle, where she gave a presentation on this very similar subject. As a bit of a quality nerd myself, I listened with intrigue and found her presentation literally outstanding. So I asked if she could come take some time out of a super busy schedule to jump on this podcast with me. And here we are. So welcome to the show, Tanya.
Hello. Thank you.
Awesome. So Tanya, why don't you just take us on a bit more of a detailed journey of your career so far?
Yeah, for sure. So after I finished my undergrad, I actually was headed towards doing a physical therapy degree. It was not for me, so I worked some odd jobs and then eventually got stuck into food and beer. Talked with a couple of friends that actually knew about Heriot-Watt and their master's program and looked into it and decided to do a food and beverage master's there. Moving to Scotland was just another perk of that as well. It was very, very rewarding, very rigorous course. Thoroughly enjoyed it, finally being able to study something I really love. And then ended up applying for a thesis project that they do every year with a master's class called Natural Selection Brewing, which basically entails, instead of doing a wet lab for your thesis, you partner with Stewart Brewing in Scotland, and you basically create a beer, a brand, and you create the recipe, the marketing, you do the sales. There's a big release event at the end of the year, so you are given a budget and you go through all the steps that it would take to basically create a product from the ground up. Just coming into school, very, very cool experience because you kind of get thrown into the deep end, but you learn a lot that way, I think. So it was really challenging experience, but had a great team that I was working with, and we made a really cool black Berliner Weiss that, in my opinion, was ahead of its time because people were freaked out by a dark Berliner Weiss, but it was delicious. We aged some of it on sloes and cherries as well, which went over really well. Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah, so did that. Then unluckily, I wanted to stay in Scotland, to be honest, but my visa ran out. So headed back to Chicago. Ended up landing a job with Goose Island Brewery after getting back. And honestly, one of the best experiences I've ever had. The people I met there are veterans in brewing and barrel aging. The lab analysts that I met there are extraordinarily smart and drilled the aspect of quality and perfection into me. There was very, very little room for mistakes, but they also knew how to have a good time as well. But it was a very rigorous program, and there was a lot of discipline involved as far as analytical and micro and sensory. So I think I got a lot of cool exposure, and then moved on as a sensory coordinator. Kind of basically, Goose Island has a lot of plants across the world where they make their core brands. So some of my job involved making sure our products in house were up to par, up to standard, but another half of my work was in regards to making sure that our core brands reflected what breweries in Canada and China and different countries were brewing, and that it aligned all together. So a lot of kind of intercontinental work with that as well, which is challenging when you have to sample beer bottles that have been set in customs in 20-degree weather. So that's always a fun tasting when you get the beer and it's oxidized to hell, basically.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this. I
You're good. It's a
apologize.
safe place.
Okay. Um, so then from there, I got heavily involved in their sour and barrel aging program. They have a warehouse that has about 8,000 barrels stored in it at one time, which is massive. It's huge. It was my mecca, my safe place. It was one of the best places to be. It smelled incredible. But basically, 3 summers in a row, uh, part of my job was going in every morning, tasting 50 to 100 barrels at 13, 14%, sampling a little bit from each one. But by lunchtime, you get pretty sloshed very easily. But you learn a lot from barrel variation,
Mhm.
just different nuances of what you can get from different barrels. You kind of learn what's good, what's not good, what different types of wood and char will give you, which was a really, really cool experience. Just having to have that chance to kind of taste through a lot of uh, a lot of different types of barrels and sour barrels as well. Those are even more crazy
Mm.
sometimes. Did some foeder work as well, some tried to propagate lactic bacteria, which is more challenging than I thought it would be. But yeah, just did some work there with the warehouse manager and the crew there. They were great. Got dubbed as one of the barrel boys, so I wear that badge
That
with
there's a
honor
badge of
still.
honor,
Yeah,
yeah.
if I ever visit, I still retain that title.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Then my time at Goose was over. I was actually itching to come back to the UK. So I started looking for jobs, and initially I was actually hunting for distilling jobs, and happened to come across the role with Northern Monk through a recruiter, Carling Partnership, and they reached out to me and wanted to see if it would be a good fit. And I think I went through 4 rounds of interviews at 5 a.m. my time because it was a nightmare. I had to get up, make a huge pot of coffee, and pretend to be awake. Um, Got to meet Ross, Luca, the former CEO, and Sophie, the former HR manager, too, and just got to chat with them. And we all got on really well. And so it was just exactly the opportunity I wanted to have. It was just a new challenge. I felt like I was stagnating a bit. I learned a lot at Goose, but I kind of wanted to have more, just more freedom to kind of do my own thing. So yeah, just decided to accept the job during COVID. Getting a visa in the UK is a lengthy process, but doing it during COVID is a
Mm.
nightmare. I don't recommend. But somehow made it over, and yeah, I got to Northern Monk. They were looking to expand and basically build out their quality program. The lab was tiny, tiny, very small when I got there, with very minimal equipment and minimal programs. So I was basically given 2 rooms, one an old production office, and one was the kind of small lab that they had. And my boss just said, "Tell us what you need and start building." So
So good.
a lot of my time, I got a lot of freedom on creating this, which was really cool. Never been so scared to
Hmm.
mess up, but also so excited at the same time.
Hmm.
So it was cool to just spend some time in lockdown sketching out, where the autoclave is going to go, and measuring out
Hmm.
countertops and looking at floor tiles and talking to electricians and things like that. So I feel like I spent my lockdown productively. And then also just creating a lot of sample plans at work, at home, just trying to get ahead and sort of set up a system so we could maintain it. But yeah, And a year and a half later, the lab is done. We have analytical on the micro side fully equipped with all the gadgets. We do a lot of testing. We have a pretty robust program. We're still always building on it, but we have the basics down, and it just feels really rewarding to kind of come in and maintain what we have and just feel like we have control over our process. But that's kind of where I'm at now, and learning and building on it more as we go.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the lab and it is awesome. I was walking around, I was like, yeah, and this is before I'd met you and everything. I didn't really know the story. So I walked around, I was like, oh, this is a really well set up lab. I really appreciate it from my point of view.
Yeah.
I mean, you must have had like so much exposure because at Goose Island, because that was post AB takeover, right? So you must have been
It
a
was,
lot
yeah.
of equipment there that you get exposed to, which is so useful, I guess, when you learn from the biggest and you can help filter that down to some of the more craft brews. That's really where it pans out, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. There was also a lot of employees that got retained from the business before it was taken over. So they kind of saw the expansion grow and they learned as they went. So those were the people to kind of learn from the most
Mm,
because they just saw everything get installed and built on. But yeah, that was my exposure to, just the centrifuge and the flash pasteurizer that they had, how they created Bourbon County Stout, how all of that adjunct work happened. A lot of tankering work. There's a lot of tankers going back and forth between the warehouse facility and the main brew site. So a lot of exposure to that and just how things can go right and how things can go wrong.
hmm,
Um, just a great packaging line. And while I was there, they installed a state of the art, brand new canning line, which was really
hmm,
cool to see come together because the speed of that was insane.
hmm.
So it was kind of cool to see that set up and just see how it's verified quality wise and just to see it up and running as well. So yeah, a lot of cool equipment, but especially I think a lot of really knowledgeable people was kind of the takeaway for me just because they were there from the beginning and a lot of people stuck around after the takeover and they just they knew a lot about the site, a lot about the build out and just yeah, huge learning experience for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've got so many questions on how you manage an 8,000 barrel room. So
It's easier than you think. They
really,
sort of age themselves, they just sit there and once in a while one, like cracks and spills and you clean it up and then you just leave it alone and it makes delicious beer. So it's the extraction season is absolutely mental though.
yeah.
It's a very, very highly coordinated schedule with tankers and extractions and fills. It's the team there is extraordinary. They run a really, really tight shift. So it's really cool to watch.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's such an iconic beer, really, and an iconic brand. How did you find being exposed to such I'm going to say, like well-oiled machine at Goose Island to stepping into basically almost a clean slate at Northern Monk, but you basically got to do yourself. How did you find that change? 'Cause it's quite a big transition going from basically everything to sort of you've now got to do it all yourself. So.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, just moving country during COVID and also walking into a lab that wasn't really like fully built out. It was a bit of a shell shock. So, yeah, I kind of walked in and I got a bit overwhelmed at first because there was so much to do and just loads of ideas running through my head. But that's just one of those things you got to get organized and just take it one step at a time. And Northern Monk was going through a lot of expansion at the time as
Mm,
well. They were increasing their tank capacity and doing a lot of construction work on the site just to make things smoother and run better. They were installing the flash pasteurizer and things like that. So there was just a lot of movement. There was contractors on site all the time, contractors in the lab all the time. It was absolute chaos. But when the dust settled, it was really rewarding. But I was talking to my lab tech LOEs the other day, and we just sometimes we reflect back on just us we had to build a little mobile lab at some
mm.
point because they were putting down the floor and the walls and all that stuff in the actual lab. So we basically had to create a little movable lab, a little like station that we could cart around. So it was just going from that to where we're at now. It just looks a bit pathetic, but we have like fond memories and just working on a little tiny table where everyone was eating their lunch because that was the only space available. But
Yeah.
now, we have all this lab space now to do all our work. So we were just reflecting on that, and you just sort of block it out a little bit because you don't realize how busy and how mental that is until it's over, and then you're like, you can see the finished product, and it's actually really cool.
It's so funny how quickly you go back to the basics of quality. I mean, when we were commissioning the new brewery at Beaver World, we were in like one of those porta cabins outside. It's still a total building site on the inside, but we were going ahead with the commissioning. And in
Mm.
this like tiny porta cabin, we had like a pH meter, a density meter, some deionized water, and like this. We
Yep.
had like someone was using an old laptop box and like cut out a hole in the middle and put like an Imhoff cone in it. And I was just looking around. I was like, when you reflect exactly that, reflect about with some of the team at the time, and I was just like,
Yeah.
I can't believe that we were doing like 600 hectoliters of beer, and we're just like, this is how we were checking the process. It was crazy. But you just go back to the core basics of like, these are things we need to know that are happening, and everything else can be done by another lab. But yeah, it's quite funny.
Yeah.
I completely relate to that level of reflection. You're like, that was crazy, and at the time, you're just doing it. It doesn't even feel crazy. It's only on
Yeah, it's a
reflection.
necessity, so
Yeah,
you just have to do it because there's nothing else, but then, it's sort of you kind of forget.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's try and get everyone who's listening on the same wavelength. Like, can you give us like the high level view of what quality looks like in a brewery, and if you can categorize that, for example?
Yeah, for sure. So just to kind of do broad strokes, just to keep it really simple, we can kind of focus on physchem and the analytical side of things. So basically your quantitative data, anything that you can have a high or a lower limit on, anything you can measure, basically anything that gives you a number that you can aim for. We have our micro side, which is, I'll talk about it more, but you can have it be as complicated or as simple as you like.
Mm.
So that basically entails not just testing for microbes and wild yeast and things like that. It's also maintaining your yeast program and making sure that you have all your ducks in a row as far as how far you're taking your generations, how you're propagating, checking on the health of the yeast and things like that. So that's very important. It also is quantitative, but there's more of kind of microscopy and more so like plate reading, and you need kind of like to train your eye and do a bit of research about what strains you're working with and things like that. And then the other two, I think there's a double component to the last one, so sensory work. You want to have sensory work be a huge part of your brewing process, not just from what's inside the brewery, but also when the product goes outside of your brewery. So internally, you want to have your panels, your innovation panels, finished beer panels. When you're having beer that's in progress in bright tanks, even when it's in transferring, sometimes even tasting in FV. Sometimes you taste your wort. Depends on the situation, depends on the brewery. But also, there's a big component of shelf life testing and retaining that beer and having a, a better outlook on what the beer is going to be like when the consumer gets it. Because obviously, it's going to have a few weeks on it, maybe a month, depending on your sales stock rotation. You're going to want to know what the customer is actually getting, and you're going to want to keep an eye on the sensory for consumer complaint reasons as well. So there's sensory internally in the brew house or in the brewery, and then there's also sensory kind of outside in the market that you kind of have to keep track of because it does change over time.
Yeah, really interesting. So you mentioned them, but do you feel that all those categories are equal, or would you say there's a ranking of importance to a craft brewery?
For a craft brewery, I would say pay attention to the analytical and the sensory. The micro, although it's good to have, you can get around doing very simple things to test the stability of your beer. So as long as you have, my biggest thing is consistency. As
Mhm.
long as you can find consistency in your fermentations, in your materials, in your processes, you can get away with very simple micro. Micro is great to have if you want that extra validation and you want to work with different yeast strains and you want to kind of expand on what you're doing and make sure that the product that's going out is definitely good for sale, especially if you're a craft brewery that's starting to grow, starting to gain traction, starting to get a bit bigger. If you have a core beer that people are starting to dig and it's growing momentum and it's selling really well, you can have analytical, but that's when you need to start looking at micro as well, because it just takes one bad batch to give you a bad reputation. So I would primarily focus on, I always focus on sensory first, because you can find so many mistakes via sensory that analytically you would never find. So sensory first, probably analytical second, and analytical and micro I'll put on the same level, but I always put sensory first because you can that's been kind of the stopper for both at Goose and at Northern Monk. I've seen that be kind of the final checkpoint before the beer goes out, and if somebody notices something wrong, that's uh a huge help and a huge kind of control point to have.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. I think sensory is also, I say the easiest is probably not the right thing to say, but it's definitely the most affordable thing to do.
It is. It's free.
Yeah, it's basically free.
Yeah.
And you can catch so
Yeah.
much more with your nose than you can analyzing everything with,
Yeah, totally.
So, and again, with micro, I think micro is one of the most interesting parts of brewing quality. I think it can be quite difficult on a craft brewery scale to manage that, especially when you're quite small.
Even if you don't have a micro program, you can spot micro issues from your analytical data, which is useful as well. So you don't need fancy equipment to be able to know, that your beer is over attenuating or you have something funky growing in there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
such a good point. I love that. What do you think are the pieces of equipment or even procedures that all brewers should have regardless of size?
Yeah. So same thing as before. I think it's important to focus on what kind of brewery it is and what your specialty is. And also go at it in broad strokes and divide your brewery up into sections, right? So overall, I think starting from the top, brew house, it's very important for brew house, cellar, transfers, packing, all of it. Get yourself a decent density meter. If you can afford Anton Par, they're great. They provide really good data. I know a lot of people are still using hydrometers. They're fine, but it's it's a very competitive world out there. So if you can splurge on a really good density meter, pH meter, and DO meter, that would be probably my top three, because everything you're going to track from beginning to finish, you're going to want to know your density of your beer. You can calculate everything from it. You can calculate your ABV if you're over or under attenuating, if you're hitting your brew house specs, your cellar specs, etc. Your pH meter can tell you so much information. It can tell you what's lacking in the brew house, salt addition, acids addition, if you are hitting your targets pre or post boil, if there's something missing. One other important thing for the brew house would be to do an iodine test. Some breweries don't actually take the time to do this, but you would be amazed at how many issues you can resolve just by looking at your conversion. Let's see, what else do we want? We want a microscope. So very important. I know I said that micro, if you have the money, dive into micro, but if you want to have successful fermentations, if you want to have your yeast go the limit, get yourself a microscope and get yourself a hemocytometer, some test tubes, some methylene blue, and some diluted acid. Because a lot of people will use kind of like automated cell counters. I've used Oculize before, and it's a great instrument. I really like it, but I found for me it was a lot of setup. So and sometimes the cord that I was using would kind of get buggy to the phone, and I couldn't get the right picture and things like that. So I just have this thing where I kind of revert back to the analog method. So have your fancy gadgets if you can afford them. If you can afford things like Oculize or other cell counters, it's great. But always have a hemocytometer in your drawer, even if it's collecting dust. Just have it, because you never know if if the new fancy gadget is going to break, if the app's not going to work, always have your hemocytometer. You can do a quick dilution, a quick cell count. There's loads of literature online on how to use one and how to count cells. And it can be a great tool for you to get your pitches right, because you can have a lot of issues over under pitching beer, over under attenuation, off flavors, and things like that. And also when you're cropping yeast, it helps you maximize your crop yields, right? So if you have a good pitch, a pitch that matches your degree Plato, you're going to have 3-4 times the crop, which is reusable yeast, which is going to save you a ton of money down the line. Get yourself a small incubator. Talking about micro, if you get yourself a small incubator, you can do some punish tests, which basically, if you don't have the money to get fancy lab equipment, turn your incubator on to 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. Put a can of beer in there and let it cook for 2-3 days, and then test the gravity again. Ideally, the gravity should not move. So basically, what you're doing there is you're speeding up the aging process, right? So if you get a small incubator and you test the cans that way for any beers that you think are at risk, or you can test all of them, everything you package. Get a can from, beginning, middle of run, end of run, and then stick it in there. Get it out 2 days later, test the gravity. If everything looks stable, likelihood your beer is going to be shelf stable. So that's a really, really easy, quick check. It takes 1 second. Small incubators are really affordable secondhand. And they're really worth investing in. Water bath. I would get a water bath. Something that I introduced at Northern Monk is doing BDK tests. So I've had beers when I've been out at various breweries that, when you get a pint, and it's so disappointing when the first whiff you get is of diacetyl. I know some people prefer it, some people like it. I absolutely despise it. I know that some people recognize it and don't exactly know what it is, but they just know that they don't like that pint. They're not going to get that pint again. It takes over the smell of the hops. It takes over the smell of the malt, and it just creates this unbalance in the beer. And some people can't pick it out what it is, but they just know there's something they don't really like about the beer, so they won't buy it again. Right? You want customers to keep returning to the brand, so you got to make it reliable. VDK tests are really easy to do with a water bath. You just get a sample in a glass jar, stick it into water at 55 degrees Celsius, let it cook for half an hour, then chill it, smell it. If you can still smell diac, let fermenter go for a bit more before you crash it. So it can also tell you to do various actions from there. If you see that your diacetyl is not reducing, you can do a little Croisen pitch, you can rouse your tank, you can kind of have action items like that, which you can study up and research. So I don't want to get carried away with that. But it's a really good tool to kind of check if your beer is finished fermenting and it's ready for conditioning. And it's really easy to get. So we don't actually have a proper we have one now, but in the beginning, all we did is we got what are those called? Not a pressure cooker. What do you cook chili in? It's a slow cooker. Slow cooker. We basically just got a slow cooker, filled it with water, set it up to 55 degrees C, and just cooked some jars in it until we had enough budget to get a proper water bath. And it works, all you're doing is you just need to heat up some water. So it doesn't have to be expensive. You can go on Amazon and get, yourself a little tiny slow cooker. I would also advise to get a DO meter for your brew house, a small one, but also a DO meter, a large one like a Hoffman, for your cellaring, for your bright tanks. Dissolved oxygen is very important, and to have meters and calibrated meters to properly measure it is a huge lifesaver sometimes, because a lot can go wrong during transfers, during packaging, during fermentations, where you can get oxygen ingress and you can catch problems really quickly with a DO meter. So it's super important to have one, because you don't want people drinking your IPA and it's brown by the time it gets to them. For canning and kegging, I would say a seam checker is very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they they're really cheap. They're small little gadgets. You can save yourself a lot of trouble with leaking cans in transit. And also very important, get yourself an ATP meter because that will be a lifesaver. If you can't have a full-fledged micro program, get yourself an ATP meter. Start swabbing uh, tanks, hoses, anything you clean. It's at least going to give you an idea if what you're doing is working, if your cleaning products are up to par, if you're cleaning at the right percentages, if you're rinsing properly, etc. Um, I think that's the top ones that I would recommend to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
how would you, I mean, actually, I've got some questions that are really interesting, especially incubators, because it's not
Yeah.
something that people would speak about very often as like an essential piece, but I totally get why it would be.
Mhm.
With the incubator, is there, so let's say I put a can in at a certain temperature, is there like a linear amount of time, that days to like weeks or months ratio? So if I put it in for 7 days, does that equal a certain amount of time down the line?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Um, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that if you leave it in for 48 to 76 hours, it will give you a good representation if the beer is going to re-ferment or not, because at that temperature, it's enough to activate if there's any wild yeast or any beer spoiling bacteria in there for it to actually kick off. So as far as the linear representation, I'm not sure, but 2 to 3 days is enough to check the stability for sure.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I was at a brewing talk not that long ago, and they were like, put your hand. There was a bunch of brewers, probably like 30, and they're like, put your hands in the air of anyone who has a microscope. And two
Mhm.
people put their hands up, and I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
kind of, you can catch so much with a microscope. I mean, even if you're just dry pitching and ditching, I still think you can catch a lot.
Mhm.
And I was speaking to a brewer recently who caught an infection on their beer before it went into pack by being able to spot that what they were seeing was not a yeast cell. And
Mhm.
I thought that was really cool. It's a really good use of a microscope. You actually get to know what your yeast looks like and what a healthy yeast cell looks like, which
Yeah.
is valuable.
Yeah, if you get into kind of like heavier micro, you spot, hopefully you don't, but if you spot some wild yeast, like candida or pica yeast, and you kind of look at it versus brewer's yeast, um once you start looking at the morphology of all these cells, they are quite different, and they are quite different sizes, and the way they grow, the way they chain is different. The way saison looks will look very different from ale yeast and very different from lager yeast. Brettanomyces will look entirely different
Mm.
as well. So once you start seeing some of these morphologies, you kind of get used to what's in your beer. And if you have a contamination, you can take a sample, centrifuge it, or just you take a sample directly from a tank, put it in an incubator once again. That yeast will multiply, and then you can take that, look at it under a microscope, and you kind of have an idea of what you're working with. And in addition, you can spot things like calcium oxalate, which is a deposit that can cause gushing in cans, and it's really noticeable under a microscope. It just looks like a kind of like a cube-shaped prism. It's very interesting looking, but it's in a lot of beer here just because there's hard water in England, but
Yeah.
that's kind of why you soften your water, is to get rid of those deposits, and why you clean properly. But you can spot, so if you have issues with your beer and you just literally open up a can, take some with a pipette, put it on a wet mount and just stick it under a microscope, you can actually find out a lot. You can
Mm.
find out what yeast you're dealing with. You can find out if there's excess protein in your beers that aren't supposed to have excess protein. You can find out different types of bacteria, if there's actual residual calcium oxalate deposits, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually know about the calcium oxalate being able to spot underneath the microscope. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really obvious. It's very
Huh,
easy to see. So if you have a lot of it, you'll know. It's like little crystals.
huh. Yeah, I'd love to see that. That's awesome. So this is all great, right? And I know same, probably maybe this similar experience to me in the sense you got exposed to people telling you how to use his equipment. But
Mm-hmm.
for brewers who are starting up by themselves, maybe they haven't had this same experience that you have. How do they find out how to use pieces of equipment?
Um, yeah. So same way I found out, watch a lot of YouTube videos.
Hmm.
There's a great book called The Brewing Science Laboratory, that
Mm.
you can get on the ASBC site. It's if you have a chance to link it in this podcast, I
I
can
can
send
link
you
it
a
in the
link for it.
notes for sure.
Yeah. It's actually a great book. I bought it when I got the job with Northern Monk because I knew how to work in a quality lab. I was so overwhelmed with where to start.
Hmm.
I just needed some sort of outline.
Hmm.
And that book is really great because it's just a manual. It gives you a step-by-step process of where to start, how to do each aspect of your laboratory, and it's not overwhelming. They give you a lot of choices of what you can do, and you kind of take things as they come, or you can leave things out depending on what your brewery requires. But it was a really great tool to outline what you need to get as the essentials so you don't get overwhelmed. So all the equipment I just mentioned, that's kind of what I had available to me, and that's what I found useful. But that book will also note that you can use other pieces of equipment as well that you might find if you're working with different yeasts with different processes that might be useful to you.
Yeah, I did not know about the book. That's awesome. We'll definitely link that in the notes or in the
Mhm.
description of this podcast. It should be
Yeah,
there. So,
I also spend a lot of time just chilling on the couch reading manuals. So I
yeah.
strongly recommend anything you get,
Uh,
read the manual. You'll learn a lot. You'll learn all the buttons. It's really boring sometimes, but make yourself a cup of tea and on a
y-
rainy day and read an autoclave manual.
yeah, you actually learn so much from those manuals. It's actually so true.
Yeah,
You're like, oh God,
yeah,
I remember reading retrospectively and thinking, oh God, I really should have read this a lot sooner. I would have learned,
yeah,
I would have been able to
yeah.
save a
I've
lot of
I've
time.
I've done that a few times myself. Yeah, you can learn how to solve very simple issues if you just read the manual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's so many online resources. MBA has a lot of online resources as far as equipment, ASBC, YouTube. You can find anything on YouTube,
Yeah.
even down to the type of model of microscope you're using. So, yeah, just watch a lot of videos if you don't know how to use it, or email me and I can take a trip and help you.
There you go. That was the golden ticket everyone was looking for. They're like, oh, instead of
Yeah, that's
reading, I
fine.
could just email.
Yep. Yep.
um, yeah, I think what I've done before as well is if I was like unsure, like maybe a good example is the yeast. I'm looking at the microscope thinking, I'm not sure if this is correct. I take a picture and I'll send it to my yeast supplier. Be like, can you send this to the labs, the people who are looking at this all of the time and tell me if what they're
Hmm.
seeing is abnormal or not. I thought that's quite I think it can be quite a useful way, and your supplier is always dead keen to help out.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, they are. We worked with White Labs for quite a bit.
yeah, I love White
And
Labs.
those guys are awesome. Whenever we have problems, they're really quick to jump on a conference call and just like talk about what's going on and how they can help, give some advice. So yeah, definitely reach out to your supplier. They know a lot about the product they're giving you. So
Yeah, I had exactly the same positive experience with White Labs as well for that. Great.
yeah.
So, I mean, Tanya, I know this is going to be quite an irritating question, but let's say I'm a brewer on a super shoestring budget. What would be like your top three purchases?
Top three.
Mm,
Okay.
narrow it down.
Microscope,
Yep.
gravity meter.
Mm-hmm.
That doubles as a pH meter, if
Love
that's
that.
possible. Because I think it's so important to have a DO meter in your brew house. A lot of people forgo this, but I have learned over the last 3 years that it's very important to get your oxygenation right. And it's really important that not all yeast likes the same amount of oxygen.
Mm,
So if you want really healthy yeast, healthy fermentations, and you want to crop your yeast and maximize on your money that you're spending on fresh yeast, an oxygen meter can be your lifesaver.
yeah.
Or if you can somehow quantify your oxygen as it's going
Mm-hmm.
into the brew house, that's also or into the FV, that's also a possibility.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah, I would probably do those gravity meter, pH meter, and microscope. And if you have the time, a DO meter.
yeah, I love that actually. And what DO meters are, I've not seen very many of them in the breweries that I worked in and visited. So I can, but that, as you're right, they're so essential to knowing basically how healthy yeast is such a prerequisite for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great. So, actually, you mentioned one earlier, but I think this is quite an interesting topic. But can you use cheaper equipment from other industries to replicate what expensive pieces of quality equipment can do? So you already mentioned the slow cooker instead of the water bath, which I absolutely love. But are
Yeah.
there any other types of cheaper equipment you can buy to replicate quality expensive pieces?
Yeah, for sure. So you can actually use this is again with cookers, but you can use a pressure cooker as an autoclave.
Mm.
One of the things that you would use an autoclave for is if you decide to get into plating and using media. If you're doing that, you're gonna have to autoclave that media because you receive it in a powder. Basically, you just mix it with some DI water and then you sterilize it in an autoclave. Many a time, this actually happened at Goose Island is where I got this idea. When the autoclave broke, maybe like once or twice while I was there, one of the lab techs just ran into the lab storage and brought out the pressure cooker, and I was just like, "What is this gonna do?" He's like, "This is how we're gonna cook our media." And I was just like, "Oh, I thought we were just gonna stop doing micro." He's like, "We're not stopping doing micro." It's like we're gonna find a creative solution here. So yeah, basically just use smaller jars. So it took us a few more rounds, but you just throw that in, throw a bit of water in, put it on, sterile can settings like you would or jar settings like you would for jam, for example. And yeah, you just have sterile media that you can use to plate. Um, and I actually think that media is not very expensive to use. You can get 500-gram jar for about 25 quid from Neogen, which is really affordable. And Petri dishes are pretty cheap as well. So if you want to do a bit of plating, that's a really, really easy way. Other tips. I would say, yeah, I don't really know any other ones.
Yeah,
I
they're
can't
good
think it.
ones.
During this, if I think of a good one,
Yeah,
I will let you know, because I definitely have like cheated and used a few things that I shouldn't have
yeah.
for for lab purposes.
Um, yeah, but actually, where can brewers find secondhand equipment? Like, where would be their best place to find secondhand lab equipment?
Um, Succeeded on eBay.
Mm-hmm.
eBay is really good. Amazon will have some of your basic lab supplies, so you don't have to go to a huge lab supplier to buy things like flasks, a stir plate, pipettes. For example, I get transfer pipettes from Amazon, and they're like £6 for like a pack of 500 or something. Really, really useful just to have. So anything you can get that's kind of like a consumable or that you're going to use a lot of, just Amazon, eBay. QCL, they are a company that works with a lot of suppliers in the UK, so I recommend looking them up because they can actually find deals on things and their reps are really great. Murphy and Sons, they have some reagents and media and things like that, and they also have some lab services that they do, so they can hook you guys up with that. VWR is a big one, big company that supplies equipment. They can be expensive, but I recommend signing up for an account with them because sometimes they have really, really good discount deals on bulk orders. So if you know you're going to be using a lot of something, go through them because they're like the Costco of lab supplies, I guess. If you look around, a lot of their equipment is pretty pricey, but I would definitely check them out if you see kind of discounts and things like that. Fisher Scientific, they're also really good. They're also a bigger company, but they also do bulk discounts on things. So if you kind of stock what you need, and you kind of get repetitive orders, you can find something that's cheap, that's on discount, that you can get in bulk that'll last you a while. Neogen, I mentioned them before. If you want to get into plating and media, they're super, super affordable. Definitely one of the few ones that I found that have yeast and mold agar. They'll have agar that grows bacteria and wild yeast, and then They have Racaré, which will grow your lactic acid bacteria.
Hmm.
And they have a lot of different options online as well, and their reps are really friendly, so I strongly recommend them. And then if you have a bit more of a budget, and you want to get some incubators, or you want to get a plating hood, or you want to get some extra equipment, there's a company I found called Nuve.
Do you know how to
Yeah,
spell that?
Nuve.
Hmm.
They're based in Turkey, and their incubators and their uh plating hood that I got, it was half the price of anything I could find in the UK,
Hmm.
and that's including the shipping. The autoclave that we got is massive. It fits so much. It's you could probably sterilize a brewer in there. But you can look up a lot of cool equipment, and they actually have autoclaves that are very small for places that are space conscious and things like that. But they actually have a lot of equipment it's a bit more high end, but if you're kind of moving along and you get a bit of funding, I would recommend looking them up because you can find prices a lot cheaper than anything in the UK.
That is a huge tip. I did not know that place existed. That's really cool.
Yeah, neither did I. Total fluke.
That's awesome.
But all their equipment is still working great for us, so I can adequately recommend.
That's even better because I think
Yeah.
that'd probably be like the biggest concern when you're taking on a new. I mean, I guess you went through this, but you're taking on this new supplier of like what is still very important, expensive equipment. You're like, oh my god, I hope this holds up.
Yeah, exactly. It's the shipping part that's worrisome. So
Yeah,
you're always afraid something's so when you get it, check it that it's all in one
yeah,
piece. Because usually it's the shipping that kind of screws you over, but everything we got from them arrived in really, really good shape. So
that's great.
yeah.
Another way in my past, people have got secondhand equipment from big breweries in the UK. So it's like knocking on the door and asking, or like
Oh yeah.
befriending some people, because a lot of these
Yeah.
people are having like really nice equipment that kind of ages for their process, and they're looking to
Hmm.
get rid of it. And it can almost be not a burden, but they'll just sit it in the side and they'll be like,
Yeah.
well, we're not really doing
I
much with it.
Yeah, I would also recommend that's definitely a good one to network with other breweries because, if they have a small canning line that they've grown out of and you're just starting out, it could be just a couple years old and you can get it at a discount price.
Hmm.
But also, so that's more like production equipment. It's not really lab equipment, but what I would advise for breweries starting up, I just I'm very notorious for doing this because whenever I go to conferences, I just did this with Foss. They make an alkalizer, kind of like Anton Par.
Hmm.
But I walked up to them and I asked them if they rent it out on trial. So a lot of these companies, because they want to sell their equipment, they want to market it. They'll have a demo version that they bring to conferences specifically.
Hmm.
And a lot of the times they'll have one or two of those. And they either have a program where they can rent it out to a brewery for free of charge, basically because they want breweries to use the equipment and give them their feedback so they can have it for their portfolio. But also, if you can get an alkalizer for 2-3 months just free of charge to
Yeah,
use, I think that's also like a good perk. And then also you can figure out if that suits your brewery and you want to use it later. But I strongly recommend to go to these conferences, especially supplier conferences, and ask them if they have demo versions that they rent out for a lower price or if they do any sort of like free trials. Because a few of them will do that. We just did a trial with an Aber meter that we currently have. So
hmm.
we're doing a 60-day trial with them with Perfect Pitch to
Hmm.
see if it helps us with our yeast kind of yeast work and keeping our yeast healthy and getting our fermentations more consistent. So definitely, yeah, strike up a conversation with suppliers if you like what they're demoing, especially lab equipment. Just ask them if they have anything on trial or if they can rent something out at a cheaper price or if they have a demo version that they uh, lease out for free.
That's a awesome point. It gets really cool. I love that Perfect Pitch. I was actually on the promo
Oh, it's
video
awesome.
for Perfect Pitch, so
Oh, really?
I'm assuming that's why you bought it, of course.
Yeah,
Uh,
we used it at Goose Island, and I was talking with Jeremy from Aber at one
yeah,
of the conferences, and
legend.
I just really wanted to trial it, and they finally had a unit available, so we jumped on the opportunity. And it's just so nice because you don't have to crop. You just go cone to cone.
Mm.
It saves so much time. From an efficiency and like sustainability point of view, it's
Yeah.
so much better. And it's really easy to use. So the brewers are gonna be sad to see it go.
Yeah. I mean, for people who don't know what the perfect pitch is, and this is not a sales pitch, I've done my thing for the promo video. But it's basically an inline cell counter for pitching yeast. So you can pitch, this is how many cells I want in my final tank, or this is the total amount of cells I want in my tank, and it'll live count them in. So, I mean, it's like sort of
Yeah,
next
it's
gen.
awesome.
Yeah, it's next gen yeast pitching. It's pretty cool.
The gadget, the actual meter inside it is really cool. It's like state of the art.
Mm.
It's so complex. He took it out and like showed us what it looked like, and it's just looks like a spaceship.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it feels like this. Yeah, it feels like almost overkill, that technology for our industry, because we're just using it to pitch yeast for beer, but they use it in so many cross industries where it's like really
yeah, but
powerful.
it's so fun.
But
It's
it's
a
so
nice
cool.
toy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Cool. So, do you know what? It's quite common in our industry for us to assume that the data our lab equipment gives us is accurate.
Mhm.
But for sure, that isn't always the case. And there is nothing worse than making changes based on false information. So
Yeah.
how can breweries check that their equipment is reading correctly?
Yeah, so this is a big one, and this is the most difficult to get people to maintain. So calibration, super important. So you don't know what you're measuring to unless you have a standard. So you need to have DI water on site, and you need to have buffers for any equipment that you buy. Can be calibrated basically, and any equipment that you buy needs to be calibrated and needs to be maintained. So what I would strongly suggest is whenever you get a new piece of equipment, again, look at the manual, see what the recommended calibration is, see how often and what buffers you need. For example, we'll take a pH meter. We calibrate with a 4 and a 7 buffer because we're working with beer, so we don't calibrate to 10 because beer
Mm-hmm.
is never really that basic. Um, so we calibrate off of those two standards. If we ever reach outside of those control limits, we have a control limit on either side. So let's say it's 4.05. So if you're measuring at 4.06, you know you need to recalibrate your pH meter because instruments will drift. Any instrument you get, as you measure with it more often, it will drift, it will get dirty. The cells that are used to measure the liquid uh, will drift over time and they can skew your readings. And actually, if you plot these data points, you can actually see trend lines and you can see data trending either lower or higher than your control limit. So, calibrating every equipment that you have, different equipment will have different buffers. Like if you get an Anton Par, the only calibration you need is DI water. So it's super affordable. Always have DI water for your lab. Never store your instruments in regular water ever, ever, ever. And basically record all that data. And then another way to kind of keep track of your records is doing analytical reports. That's something that we started doing about a year and a half ago. So what that entails is for pretty much any beer you make, you want to have high and low control limits for your gravity, for your pH, your EBCs, all of that. So as you're going through your brewing process, you're measuring all those points and seeing if you're hitting targets. That way, if your scores start to drift and you're seeing that you're not hitting your targets, you can see if it's something to do with your equipment, or you can dig into if it's something to do with the ingredients, but you're going to start to see trends. So the more data you log, the better. I know data recording is a pain. No one likes it. This is why it's difficult to get people to do it. But if you actually have a dedicated team that's doing this, it can save you a lot of time because you won't be eliminating the wrong things. You'll have a more detailed view of what the actual problem is. The other one is external lab tests. I strongly recommend this as something that we still do. We check our ABVs, we check our allergen levels, we check our water analysis, things like that. So I strongly recommend for equipment, more sophisticated equipment that you get to, like a Hoffman, for example, DO meter. We actually send it out to an external lab to get calibrated. just because we know they'll do a more accurate job of it. And then also I recommend using places like Murphy and Sons to kind of test, and SynLab as well, to test your ABVs to see if your gravity calculations are actually accurate, if the ABVs you're declaring on your cans are actually the ABVs you're hitting, because there's nothing more embarrassing than that and also illegal. So don't do that. And then the other two important ones, this is a long list because there's so many ways you can keep consistency as far as your equipment. SOPs, standard operating procedures for all of your equipment. Any equipment that you use, make sure you write your own small, it doesn't have to be extensive, it doesn't have to be a book. Use pictures. Pictures are great. A video is even better. Make documents for every piece of equipment. That way, nobody is lost on how to do it. No one's lost on how to calibrate it. Everybody has some sort of instruction at their fingertips where they don't have to leaf through a whole manual to find out what to do. They know what to do specific to your brewery. So have those documents handy, because when you have new staff coming in, you hand them that video or that SOP and they already know what's going on. They have some sort of reference point, because one of the big things I noticed in some places is that someone knows how to do something, but when they're gone, no one knows what that person knows. So you kind of have to find out through like old records and, old, messages on how to operate a piece of equipment, because it's all in that one person's head, right? So, and it's also stressful to that one individual if you have to explain it to everybody that comes in, rather than just having it all out on paper. And it just saves so much time, and it saves you the error as well. And then the last one I would encourage is training. So this goes with the SOPs. Train your staff. The more people you get to do all these checks, the more accurate it's going to be. So, and get them to do it correctly. Don't basically have people sign off on training. Don't just assume they know how to do something. Actually go through the proper training, have them sign off on it, and make sure everyone knows what they're doing, and more importantly, why they're doing it. Because a lot of people don't know why they're doing a check or what it means. Once they understand the equipment more, once they know why they're checking what they're checking, it makes a lot more sense. And if they see an error, if they see some sort of drift in numbers, they're more in tune to kind of figure out what to do with a piece of instrument.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just don't understand why people would buy pieces of equipment if they're not going to look after them. I know it sounds like a crazy thing, but it's like the data that they get.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, it's just like it gives people this like false security blanket. They're like, well, no, we're measuring that, we're good. I was like, but making sure you calibrate exactly what Tanya just said. I love that, and it's so important. And I mean, it's happened to me in my career. I'm going to sit here on my high horse and say I've always done it. And we've caught some things where we've been like, oh my lord, we have been making some pretty substantial mistakes based on the fact of this data that we've got, because we actually haven't really been looking at the equipment, or someone's been using it incorrectly, etc. So you almost sit back and think, why do we even have this thing if we're not going to look after it? Another one I was actually exposed to this at Thornbridge, and I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but like the intra-lab schemes. So we used to get them and these samples sent to us, and we'd analyze them and then email the results back, and it was all anonymous, but you get to see where you were. I thought that was really a fun thing to do, and we also got a bunch of secondhand equipment from them as well, which is pretty cool.
Definitely. I have heard that. We haven't tried them out yet, though. That's not something we tried out yet.
It wasn't the perfect solution, because either people didn't submit, or some people's equipment was reading so wrong, it skewed the mediums.
Yeah, exactly. It depends. Yeah, it depends how everyone's treating their equipment. Yeah, you can get some really fun results.
Yeah. You're like, what? You got what? Sorry? Yeah, it's really interesting. But I think it was quite a nice way of just making sure that, again, just once every month or 2 months or whatever it was, you get some beer sent to you and you get to test it. I thought it was pretty fun.
I do want to say on that note, it's not really data driven, but it is super important to calibrate your sensory staff as well. I know that sounds really weird to calibrate humans, but something we started in Northern Monk is qualified tasters. It's something that they did at Goose Island and I brought over here just because I really like that system. That basically what happens is we have brewers volunteer, and pretty much any production members that want to take part are welcome to attend. We have a sensory program that we did to train them on off flavors the same that they would in a Cicerone program. So basically, there would be a quiz, a blind quiz after that with blind samples to see if people were picking up on these off flavors. And if they scored in the top percentile, then they get registered as a qualified taster, because you want to make sure you pick out those people are kind of more sensitive to different off flavors, and you want to make sure that people know the brand that you're working with and they actually can spot defects in beer, because everyone can taste beer, but that doesn't mean that everyone's attuned to the same off flavors and to the same profiles. And some people's sensory perception might be a little weaker than others. So it's a good way to kind of like suss out who to go to as your qualified taster. So something that we started is for our core brands, for example, we have 3 tasters that are meant to taste the beer. For any specials or any one-offs that we make, it has to be 5. So you kind of increase that level of sensory work as it's a more high profile beer, because you want to have more panelists on that brand, because if it's a special or something you're working as a collaboration or for an event, you want it to be the best of the best. Obviously you want your core brand to be the best of the best as well. But that's kind of how we operate to just help with, efficiency and keeping things rolling. But it's super important to calibrate your humans as well as your
Love that.
equipment. Yeah.
Yeah, do you know, it's so great because I actually really wanted to spend a bit of extra time discussing sensory, because I know you have such an extensive experience in it. And as we discussed right at the start of this pod, that it probably is it is the most important aspect of beer quality. So for a small brewery, let's say, because not everyone had big teams, and for a small brewery looking to start their sensory program, how should it be done? And maybe as well, how shouldn't it be done? Because I think people think they're doing a sensory program and perhaps they're not really nailing the key points of what one is.
Yeah. So the main thing, well, there's a few main things. It should not be just people getting together, having a beer and having a chat. So it's not a pub. So by all means, do that after the panel. But once you're in the panel, I would recommend starting with an environment, trying to pick a room that's least offensive as far as lighting and smells and things like that. Don't do it near a kitchen or anything like that. Get a few people into a room together, and there's tools that you can use. There's a software called Draft Lab. I don't know if you've heard of it, that you can actually use to create panels on. It's not a expensive subscription at all. You can get a basic subscription. I think it's a yearly one that we have, and it's definitely enough. You can plug in your brands and you can create panels that people can just download the app on their phone and they can do the panel on their phone. It's super handy. It saves you so much paperwork, so much Excel work, because it's all just there. It's all integrated into the software. So I strongly recommend using that if you have the funds to do it. But if you can't, I would recommend starting with basic tasting panels. Once you're creating a beer and you're starting out, get a couple people in the room together. If they're off flavor trained, great. If they're not, that's fine. But get people to taste the beer and have a descriptive panel. You can find a lot of descriptive panel templates online for beer flavors. So have them describe how the beer looks to them, how it smells, the taste, the mouthfeel. And also what you can do is online you can get a lot of, I think Aroxa has, and Aroxa and Siebel Institute have a lot of literature and a lot of off-flavor training equipment that you can buy. But they also have a lot of posters and different literature you can get that you can put in the lab. So if people are describing a beer and they don't know how to describe it, they can kind of look onto that map and just kind of see like, oh, I think this smells like peach. I think this smells like lemon. This is what I'm smelling. And kind of give them that platform so they have verbal cues to describe what they're smelling, what they're tasting. Then go through each aspect, have people describe the beer. And then after everyone's done, have a discussion or have everyone input it anonymously in Excel and have some sort of consensus that if we made beer X, it's supposed to look like this, it smells like this, it tastes like this. And that is now your new target profile, for example. So you know that everyone's in consensus that this beer should look, smell, taste like this. And for all future batches, you are now tasting to that profile.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's calibrated to that profile. So it's very important to take away the subjective feel of a taste panel where people get influenced because, uh, my manager doesn't like the beer. So now
Mm.
I'm not going to like the beer because I want to raise next year. So it's one of those things like you need to take the subjective feel out and it has to be very objective. So the more clear guidelines you can give to the brands that you're making, even if it's something simple like this beer should be hazy, it should smell tropical and like orange, should have medium sweetness and a low to medium mouthfeel. That it can be as simple as that.
Mm.
But if you get everybody on the same page that that is what you're aiming for, and you get a few brands or a few batches tasted one after the other, you'll get people calibrated to the core brand as you start building out your main beers that you're making. And then also important to do hedonic panels, which basically are preference based. So get a few people together from your breweries and do just a silent panel where people are rating just how much they like the beer.
Mm.
Would they basically the way I explain it is, would you go for a second pint or would you
Mm.
pay for this beer? And you'd be surprised how many people in the brewery that you work in, rate it as no, I would not buy another one, even though I made it. So it's really good to do those kind of hedonic panels just to see what people in general think. So no rules, no regulations, just what's your
Mm.
perception of this? So I would recommend to start there and also just use Excel to document
Mm.
all of this. I would recommend doing silent panels, have some water or crackers to cleanse the palate for people. Have the samples in clear cups just so they're blind samples. Have them labeled as the brand if you want, or just A, B, and C. And just kind of start there as you're building your brands. Describe your brands and create those target profiles because they save so much time
Mm.
when you're going to create that beer over and over again because it takes that subjective input out of it and everyone's aiming for the same goal. So when you see that the beer's straying from what it's actually supposed to be from the target profile, you can tweak. You're like, oh, did expired hops go into this?
Mm.
Or did, a different type of malt get used in this? Or does this have diacetyl and we need to tweak our yeast pitches? So you can
Mm-hmm.
find out what's wrong with the beer if you have a target you're aiming for.
Yeah, yeah. Love it. Everything is so good. And it's so true as well. I think it's just one of the most powerful tools that a brewery has. It just has to make sure people are doing it in the best of their ability individually. It's what I like to think because it's
Mm-hmm.
quite often you see groups of people together, exactly as you mentioned. What do you think? Or what I find is just as bad is there's people who sit around a group and one says, I get this. Because
Mm-hmm.
either instantly the people who are unsure say yes, or the people whoever said it, maybe they're like, as you said, their manager or a head brewer or someone of importance who's been there a long time. They're like, I wouldn't disagree with this person. But actually, then
Mm-hmm.
you're shutting down what the point of the panel is, and it should never be just to validate yourselves and be like, yeah, this is great. Actually, it should be the opposite. It's like, what have we done wrong, and how can we find it? I think that's like a
Yeah,
nicer way
definitely.
of looking at sensory. Like, okay, and yeah, just getting it out of the groups and into the sort of the people doing it individually, having the confidence to write down what they feel on the sheet, and then never
Mm-hmm.
shaming people naturally, but and then just
Yeah.
analyzing what people are saying and try to spot those trends.
Yeah, you don't want to discourage people from doing sensory. You definitely want to train people to do sensory,
Mm.
but I've seen it be the case where, you know, there's someone that's like working on the packaging line that has, an extravagant palette, but never comes to panel because they're like, oh, well, I'm not management.
Mm.
I don't work in the office and I don't make the beer. I just package it. So what do I know? But when in reality, when they're trained to, kind of recognize the brand, maybe they're, a super taster and they can sense off flavors really well. And you're just discouraging that person from attending. I think there shouldn't be that air in a brewery. I think everyone should be welcome, and I strongly encourage kind of unbiased panels where people aren't just chatting, but you're actually kind of aiming for a similar goal. And the same for innovation.
Mm.
Quality can get boring because it sounds like it's a lot of rules, but I strongly believe that if you get all your ducks in a row and you have everything organized, you have more room to be creative because you're not worried about something going wrong. It's a controlled process that you have your baseline. So you can build on that and do crazy stuff after you have your baseline covered. But for innovation, what we do at Monk is we have a panel once a week where we taste unfinished beer that's still in fermenter and some finished beer with different types of like additions, adjuncts that are just dosed in jars. And we kind of taste them blind, and then we get everyone's opinion after everyone's tasted to see what we prefer. And we found a lot of cool, outcomes of that where we sort of rejig concepts as they're being made to make them taste even better. So I strongly encourage doing those kind of in progress innovation
Mm.
panels,
Mm-hmm.
and doing some like pilot brewing as well, because you can tweak a lot of small things to make your beer more awesome before it goes production scale.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so cool. We could talk about sensory for like ages. I feel
Yeah.
it's such a
Yeah.
good subject. Yeah, key takeaways from me are just making sure you do that panel, assessing it analytically instead of qualitatively, and as a discussion, it should be exactly listen back and hear what Tanya said. I think it's perfect. But actually, kind of what we were talking about and how not to do sensory. What do you think are the most common mistakes breweries make with quality?
Ooh, common mistakes. I think rushing.
Mm.
Rushing and omitting the low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Documentation is very important. I think the main mistake that people make is you don't record your failures.
Mm.
I think you need to record your successes and your failures, because then you're just not going to learn. You're not going to progress, and it's going to be like a needle in a haystack. I think that's the broad strokes. That's the biggest mistake I've seen people make, is that record keeping can actually set you back quite a bit because you can just get stuck in a loop. Um, Cleaning, I think cleaning gets overlooked, and cleaning records as well. There's so many issues, so many issues that a cleaning, maintenance, and calibration program will solve completely. I have seen recently micro issues go down from like, high levels to basically none, just from implementing a cleaning program. So I wouldn't overlook. That's what I mean. I feel like low hanging fruit gets overlooked. Things that are not fun. It's not
Mm.
a new hop variety, or it's not
Mm-hmm.
like a new malt, or it's not a new cool beer we could try. It's like that. Most of what brewing is cleaning.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to spoil it
Yeah,
to
it is.
anybody that's not aware of that yet, but most of brewing is just cleaning. So if you're into cleaning, you're in the right industry. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's not to take away from the magic of it, but it is true. You can avoid a lot of your problems that way. I would say that record keeping, learning from your mistakes, and especially detailing your mistakes. When we first started propagating yeast, we had batches that would fail because of the top ups we were doing and the nutrients we were using, or the timing that we were using. But because we recorded the failures, we kind of found the sweet spots of like how to propagate, when to top up, how much to aerate the yeast, how much yeast to use, nutrients, etc. So it helps to record your mistakes because you can save yourself a lot of time down the line. And I think a huge thing that people don't do is they don't take care of their yeast.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people just kind of go off of what's on the bag, or go off of what, oh, I read this in the book, or eyeballing it and just saying like, oh, I have this many heck of beer, this much yeast will do. Your brews are going to taste phenomenal if you count your yeast and if you pitch the adequate amount of
Hmm.
yeast, because a lot of people don't know, but when you use dry yeast and you rehydrate it, about half of it's already dead.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't take that into account when they're pitching something. If you're making a lager, you're using 1.5 times the pitch rate that you would for an ale. So what a lot of people don't do is they don't research the strains that they're using, because it's likely that a strain might need a little more, a little bit less air, more or less zinc, more or less nutrient, uh, different fermentation temperatures. Some people ferment at a temperature for yeast that's incredibly wrong and is just not going to give favorable results for the style that you want. So I would recommend to really research your yeast usage and the strains that you're using. Um, One example I would give is we use London Fog at the moment, and it's a low flocculating yeast.
Mm.
So we kind of had to come up, with ways to push it out of solution to be able to crop more.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we've kind of trialed through it, and we figured out what's the best method for us, it's really convenient because you can cool in the brew into your fermenter, and then you can almost predict how the fermentation is going to go, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
your pitch is adequate.
Mm-hmm.
You know what day you need to crop because we've gotten that consistency, right? So it just takes the stress out of like, when should I crash this? Will diacetyl reduce in time? Is this going to taste like crap when it's done?
Yeah.
It just helps build that consistency. So you know if the brew goes in on target, if the yeast goes in on target, you're going to have an awesome beer at the end. And that's a really nice like safety blanket to have, 3 weeks ahead before it's actually like due for transfer or packaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're all really good common mistakes, I think, with quality, on top of the ones we've already mentioned. With like not calibrating your equipment, not having a microscope, which is, I think,
Just cleaning and record keeping
Yeah.
saves you so much time.
Yeah, it really does.
It's the most boring of tasks, but if they're not maintained, it is a huge time waste to have to dig through records and have to panic last minute. So I strongly recommend cleaning, maintenance, and calibrating.
Yeah, and for anyone who's listening thinking, I wonder how I could keep my records better, I actually do have a podcast on this because, of course, we cover all the weird niche topics in brewing. So I had someone who was a data expert, and he was talking about how to organize data and everything for the craft brewer. So that's an episode before in the podcast, so check that out. But yeah, I think, Tanya, is there anything else you would like to add or anything else we haven't covered?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think we've got a good amount of information here.
I think, yeah, I feel like I talked for quite a bit. So yeah.
That's good because you're the one with all the knowledge. So
yeah, I would say one more thing.
Yeah, let's go.
I did want to touch on quickly consumer complaints. Because that is a huge part of quality that I think people overlook. So I do think that this is another common mistake, is that once the beer leaves the site, a lot of people just think they're not really responsible for it anymore. You are. It's still your product and you still want it to taste really good. So I strongly advise for every starting out brewery to have some sort of consumer complaint program, even if it's just one person with like an email link with people, emailing in whether they like this brew or not, or somebody just keeping an eye on tap ratings or reviews on, your Instagram page or things like that. I strongly recommend for someone to dedicate some time to that. And what I mean by complaints program is just have an easy way for consumers to reach you if they have an issue, and also have a reaction plan. If you get caught without a reaction plan or some sort of statement to give back to a consumer, you're going to look really bad, and you're going to look like you're a brewery that doesn't really care about their product or about their customers. And also retain some of your beer. So every batch that you need a bit of space for this, but every batch that you can, take a few cans off the line, store it in a box in a warehouse shelf, or somewhere you have room. It can be ambient temperature. Label it and just have it sit there until its expiry date, basically. The reason for that is if you have a complaint about that batch, you can go back and look at it. And also you can do shelf life testing. So when you're starting out as a brewery, a lot of people don't have money for, packaging equipment that will measure, your DO and CO2 and TPO levels. It would be nice to have. I would love one, but they're very expensive, and sometimes you don't have the money for that. So a really easy way to check how your product's doing on the shelf is leave some of it behind, keep some of it back, and do shelf life testing. Go back to those cans, every 2-3 months. Do a little taste panel. Get a consensus on what people think of it. Is it oxidizing too quickly? If it is oxidizing too quickly, send it out for testing. If you're seeing that beer is turning brown in your cans, that could be an alert. for you to check out your packaging process, and maybe you have high DO levels or you have DO ingress in your transfer lines. So it's just easy things like that that you can do for free, holding back, 2 or 3 of your cans for testing later. It doesn't cost any money, I don't think. But it can save you a lot of headache down the line, because if a consumer comes back to you and has an issue, you have somewhat of an answer, or you have a can that you can send out to a lab. If they come back and they say this tastes sour, you can say, I have a can of this. I can send it to Murphy and Sons and test if there's anything. I can incubate it. I can do a punish test on it to see if there's anything growing in there. So there's really simple ways to kind of just like keep track of your beer. So I would strongly advise to have some sort of complaints reaction program, because you want to keep customers happy and, keep them coming back and encourage consistency.
Absolutely. And it's so easy to be like, well, I don't know what they're talking about. I'm the brewer. I know everything. And actually you can spot trends and stuff so easily and be like, well, actually, maybe this was a problem and stuff. Yeah, I couldn't agree.
Exactly.
That's a really good point. And one I didn't expect to cover, so that's even better. I love that. Okay, so Tanya, I think wraps everything up for us, unless there's anything else you want to add to the podcast.
No, I think that's a lot.
Yeah. It's gonna be good. I mean,
there's more I could say, but it's just, there's a lot you can do with quality. But I would suggest get that book that I suggested from ASBC. It's a really, really good outline. Really good outline on where to start, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm pretty sure we could do another about 5 podcasts on quality. So maybe down the line we can
definitely. There's too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely one I think on maybe micro down the line would be really interesting. Like, how people can start plating in breweries. So I think, again, that's one of those things that quite hard for people to get their head around when they're first starting out. They don't have loads of like maybe help elsewhere, and it can be a bit daunting. And it's so easy to get wrong as well, right? So maybe that's something we can look at down the line. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, do you hear that? That's verbal confirmation, everyone. Brilliant.
Sign my life away to podcasts on forever.
Well, look, Tanya, thank you so much. That was actually excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Cool.
And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And hopefully you'll be back on soon enough.
Yeah, just let me know. Talk micro.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Tanya. Okay, everyone, how great was that? Absolutely loved that episode. So much information, all super vital for starting your quality program from the ground up. The next episode, we're actually going to have pretty much a legend, Andrew Patterson. Most people know him. He is going to talk to us about supplier relations and how they can advance your brewery and advance your knowledge. So that's coming on in the next couple of weeks. I'm really excited. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow button, so you don't miss an episode. And thank you everyone for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the next episode of the Modern Brewer Podcast.